And welcome to the segment of the show we call Hellbent for Horrible Questions, where I invite guests on to talk about their art and answer some horrible, horrible questions. And today, our guest is Simone Kisiel, who is the founder of Magic Dog Productions in New York City. Simone has directed and edited a few feature films, one of which is a horror comedy entitled Housed, which goes live on Amazon streaming services August 31st. She's also the director of the feature film Bugs, a trilogy, which will be making its world premiere at the Women in Horror Film Festival October 4th through the 7th in Peachtree City, Georgia. I'll also be attending the festival and the premiere myself. Now, Bugs, a trilogy, is nominated in 4 award categories, one being the Best Feature Film category. And Simone, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be on your show.
Before we talk about the festival world and the world premiere that you can have, tell us a little bit about your movie Housed.
Oh, great. Housed is a horror comedy found footage sort of silly piece that is about 7 students that get caught at a house party when the apocalypse strikes. So it's sort of a sitcom. They're dealing with your average apocalyptic issues like zombies and demons, but the real trouble is living together in the apocalypse.
Now, is this something that started as a short film and then expanded into a feature?
It started as a web series. We had a 12-episode arc, and then we shot 6 more episodes and realized that instead of just releasing them online, it might be nice to put the whole thing together as like a one standalone piece. So we ended up with an hour of Housed.
Were you directing and wearing other hats as well?
Yes, on this one, I actually was the only crew member. I was the director. We shot it on a GoPro, so it was found footage. It was a little bit easier. There's some leeway there. But I was running the camera and the sound and special effects and wardrobe and craft, everything that required not an
this
actor.
Begs the question. You're doing, was this your first feature?
Yes, absolutely. It was my first foray into filmmaking on my own. I worked at Stone Street Studios after I graduated from NYU. And there I was able to put together a couple short films. But that was the first project where I stepped away from a studio and I just tried to put something together without any support outside of a very small crowdfunding campaign and a couple very dedicated actors.
So, of course, for a first feature, why not try doing 2 of the most difficult kinds of genres that are possible combined? Because comedy's hard and horror is hard, both of them because of timing. So what made you choose horror comedy as a style to start with?
Well, I love both genres and I like to put them together because I think I think there's something really magical about the juxtaposition between somewhat slapsticky comedy and the really heavy nature that of what horror can often be. But the real reason is I had 2 former students from where I was working at Stone Street who approached me and they had this concept and they wanted me to take it under my wing and see if I could make it happen. And I said yes.
So this is, let's talk a little bit about what's happening for you at the Women in Horror Film Festival. I looked on your website and you've been to quite a few festivals, to say the least. So you've been very busy since you founded your studio in 2015, correct?
Yes.
So within 3 years, you have multiple credits and have you gone to many festivals or do you just put your films out to them?
I've gone to a number of festivals, especially, of course, the ones that are local to New York. Those are easy to attend. But I back in 2015, for the web series version of House, we went to the Miami Web Fest, and that was a really great time. And the other one that really sticks out is the Portland Horror Film Festival. The genre festivals are so much fun because there are so many more attendees that are not affiliated with any of the films. They're not friends and family of the filmmakers. They're just fans of the genre, and it's quite an incredible thing to be able to be in a room absolutely filled with people who just want to see new indie horror. Where else would I run into a huge group of my people?
Yeah, that's what keeps me going to different festivals and to conventions. It's just the energy that happens there. And many different conventions have many different types of energies as well. So this is your first time going to the Women in Horror Film Festival, and you're having a world premiere. Hooray! Congratulations on that.
Thank you. We're so excited.
So tell us a little bit about Bugs, a trilogy.
Sure. Bugs is it's a horror anthology in the style of the 1975 trilogy of terror starring Karen Black, in that it's three shorts make a feature, and the same actress plays three different characters across three different stories, and it explores themes of paranoia, helplessness, and abandonment. You know, things that some of us experience in real life, and it's all connected through the idea of bugs.
And one of the things that I love about horror and people who listen to my show is that I love how easy it is to use for allegory and to have creatures and things stand in for emotions and anxieties that we've got. What's your philosophy around horror if you have something that is kind of a driving force of what you want to say?
Well, I think genres like horror and sci-fi are a really good avenue by which to, well, encourage and sometimes hopefully force critical thought around different social issues and things like that. But it's also a vehicle that can be used to explore the things that truly scare us. It's a place and a time where we can unpack the things that, you know, keep us up at night in a safe way, in a safe space where we're not actually in danger of impending death or whatever we're sort of looking at, but it's a comfortable place to explore things that make us very uncomfortable.
Now, back to you talking about the trilogy of terror kind of homage that you're doing here, or at least a stylistic idea of having one actress doing three different roles. Is that Alexandra Grunberg?
Yes, it is. So she wrote Bugs, and she also stars in each one of the pieces of it as well.
And she's nominated for Best Performance, correct?
Yes, she is.
Yeah. So have you both collaborated often?
Yeah, so she was one of the two students who approached me about Housed, and ever since then, her writing is just so up my alley. I always think of her as the new female Stephen King. Like, she's just absolutely prolific, and she's brilliant, and she gets me, and she writes stuff that is socially poignant, and it presses things, but it doesn't. It's never too heavy-handed. It's never too on the nose. So we did Housed together. And then we put together a bunch of little shorts. Like, we had a little micro short that went to the Portland Horror Film Festival. And then, of course, Bugs. And right now I'm in pre-production on a new short film that she wrote as well. And we are also in development on our next feature film. So I'm not letting her go. I'm keeping her.
Well, begs the question as well. You're the director, correct? So how is it to direct the writer of the movie when she's taking on so much, three different roles?
Yeah, she's, like I said, she's just absolutely amazing. I'm not sure that another person could do what she does, but it's really fun. It's really great. I've directed a number of actors who wrote the piece that we're working on, and she's been the most fun with that because she's very flexible when we're on set. Every once in a while, I'll be like, hold on, I need you to take off your actor hat and put on your writer hat real quick because I have a question for the writer. And she can absolutely switch gears and just handle it all in stride. So, and she's also, by the way, one of my main casting directors. So she wears as many hats as I do, and I couldn't do it without a partner who was as capable as she is.
Well, collaboration is so important. And I think that brings me back to the Women in Horror Film Festival. You're going to be there as an artist and a guest. And I know all film festivals have their own style and energy. What do you hope to experience at film festivals in general? But what do you think you're going to hopefully get out of Women in Horror Film Festival specifically?
Well, I imagine that I'm going to meet probably people that I'm going to be friends with and possibly collaborate with in the future, and people I hope to know for the rest of my life. I've seen some of the work that's come out of Women in Horror Film Festival, and it's just really good stuff. Samantha and Vanessa have selected work that's just unique and outstanding. So I'm really looking forward to meeting the people who are doing what I'm doing and learning from them and getting to know them. And I'm also really excited about sharing my work with people who I think will really appreciate it. And of course, I've got House coming out, and I've got Bugs will be live for video on demand in October. So I'm hoping to grow my audience in general for Magic Dog and to support fellow artists in the same capacity.
Let's talk a little bit about the horror fan here. It sounds like you're a real fan of the genre, which is great. What was your first kiss with horror, the movie that made you fall in love with the genre?
It was the original Mummy, the 1930s Mummy movie starring Boris Karloff. Yeah, I was very young when I was watching this movie. I watched a lot of those old timey horror movies with my dad, but there's a scene in this movie that it changed the trajectory of my life. The scene where the mummy gets up from its, I guess, sarcophagus, and it has a walk. It walks out of this room, and we see only a tiny little bit of this mummy. We see like the mummy's wrap dragging behind its foot. But what we see is the man seeing this happen in this very Hitchcockian style of not seeing the monster itself. And we watch in real time this man's mind just break on camera. And that aspect of seeing how someone, not seeing the horror as an audience member myself, but seeing someone else seeing the horror, and how that affected me so much more and so differently, that absolutely changed the way I saw any kind of artistic content, but the way I saw how to reach the audience, it changed it.
That's very interesting. Do you find yourself connected or attracted to more of a subtle form of horror, or do you go all about, like, I'm thinking when you're saying that part of the Mummy, I think of Val Lewton films where everything is shadow and it's usually reactions of the people who are terrified, which of course builds you up as well into getting scared. Do you find that that's what you are attracted to, or do you go into different areas as well with horror?
Oh, yeah, that's very much me, what you just described. I personally believe that in the same way that when you're reading a book, especially a scary book, the picture that we paint for ourselves in our own minds is going to be our scariest, most compelling version. So if I were to create that for you as a director, I'm creating my scariest, most compelling version. But if I just give you enough as an audience member to be able to fully visualize and experience your version of the scariest monster or whatever it is that we're looking at, that's going to be much more impactful than if I show you. I can't tell you how many times I've watched a movie and it's going great, and then they show the monster or the alien or whatever, right, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that looks just ridiculous. I had a much better version in my head, and it breaks the spell. So I think we, as people, we're fully capable of scaring ourselves, and we're clever. And I don't think people need that much help to imagine the scary thing. And I think it's more powerful to show less and to imply more.
So when you hear the word horror, what I love about horror is that it is such a broad genre. It really encompasses quite a bit because it starts as an emotion. But for yourself, when you hear the word horror, what flashes in your mind? What do you initially think of?
Well, I think of my two favorite horror movies, which are John Carpenter's The Thing and The Descent. That comes to mind. But what also comes to mind isn't really cinematic. I've been living in the city for over a decade, and what comes to mind is my own personal anecdotes of experiences I've had that were truly horrifying, and stories that have been shared with me by others. It's those things that make me, keep me up at night and make me wonder what to do about, X and Y. So it's real life that I think of when I think of horror. I think of that first, and then I see it mirrored in cinema itself, like The Descent.
Yeah, an excellent film. I think both of those are really, really strong films. And there's similarities as well, which I think is really interesting. So now most people, when they have a guilty pleasure, if you ask them about movies that are their guilty pleasures, they may bring up a horror movie or something like that. But we're a little bit different. So we love horror movies so much. Perhaps we can look at what your guilty pleasure is, the movie that if people saw everything that you've created and how you extol horror, they'd be like, what? You love that movie? What's your guilty pleasure?
Well, I guess this is my guilty pleasure would have to be silly movies from my past. I would say my favorite non-horror movie has got to be like Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. Absolutely absurd movies. Yeah. The original Pirates of the Caribbean. I like, I guess that's not that unusual, but so your Jim Carrey movies, your Will Ferrell movies, those silly comedies. And then this is not a movie, but it is definitely a guilty pleasure. Really wholesome and positive things like Queer Eye and RuPaul's Drag Race, stuff like that.
Excellent. And there we go. We descended into the abyss of really, really horrible questions, and you've come out unscathed on the other side.
Exactly.
Thanks so much for being on Hellbent for Horrible Questions, Simone Kisiel. Tell us where people can see Housed or Bugs a Trilogy, or where they can go to keep up with your work.
Well, we're Magic Dog Productions, so if you go to magicdogproductions.net, you'll find everything Magic Dog. But tomorrow, August 31st, Housed, the feature, will be live on Amazon.com. And if you have Prime, you can watch it for free. And feel free to give us a review and tell your friends.
And thank you again so much, Simone, for being on. And for everyone who's listening, stay hellbent.
Thank you so much.